Alright, Piss Week running fans, this is my new video. It's a two-part video. Part one is to do with marathon start groups, with particular focus on two events here in Australia, the Gold Coast Airport Marathon and the Melbourne Marathon. And then in part two, I will go into my opinion on what certain runners choose to do within allocated or non-allocated start groups within those events. Right, so moving straight into part one with the marathon start groups. I've run 11 marathons in total. 6 of those are Gold Coast, 4 of those are Melbourne, and 1 is Canberra. I'm not going to focus on Canberra because they don't have start groups. I want to focus on the 2 that I've done the majority of, plus they are more high-end events where they're required. So with the Gold Coast Marathon, starting at the front, they obviously put the elites, internationals who are sort of sub 2:12-ish on the front row with the pace runners and all that. So the first real group beyond that is called seated start. The seated start is sub 2 hours 30. Second group beyond that is from 2:30 to 2:45, which is a priority start. Going back from there, they have start group A, B, C, D, and E. Now, normally those blocks are about half an hour each. So A is up to 3 hours 30, B is 3 hours 30 to 4 hours, and so on and so on. I think the timing with the letters is right. Half-hour blocks are pretty good based on numbers. I think they get around 6,500 athletes. So to split them up into smaller categories, I think is the right idea. Looking at the front of the field, sub 2 hours 30, that will get, under normal circumstances, about the top sort of 30 runners in the event, and I think that's about right of what they need to capture. Also, they'll probably capture the first couple of lead women as well, based on experience. The priority start time of 2 hours 45 is probably the upper limit of what you would expect for a priority start. Obviously, when you're looking at 2 hours 48, 47 is 4 minutes a K. 4 minutes a K is nothing special as far as pace. I mean, it might be to some runners, but in an event like this, it's not overly flash. So sub 2:45 is sort of getting up there. I think ideally what those areas need to capture are probably the top 50 men, and I would say the top 10 women. I think as long as you've got all of those in a seated or priority start area, I think you've got a sort of winning formula. And based on experience and results and things like that, Gold Coast seem to manage that. With the Melbourne Marathon, they obviously slot the elites on in the last few seconds. Now, obviously, the times for Melbourne are a bit slower. Race record being 2:10:47, so it's not quite as quick. But they seem to have one big jumble start. That is 2 hours 50 and below. So they don't have. They mention on the site somewhere, from memory, that there is a seated start and but within that, but I can't find it. I've always started behind the barriers at the Melbourne Marathon, which is basically 3 hours and beyond. Well, the 3-hour pace balloon puts themselves on that front row. And then really beyond that, it's one big jumble right back to the back of the field where the 7,000th runner, who's going to finish in about 7 hours, is going to be. The only thing that you can give runners a rough idea on where they should be starting is the pace runners, who have flags on them. And I think they have balloons as well, I'm not too sure, for Melbourne. So it's sort of, you can put yourself anywhere really. It's not really divided up too well. So going back to the front area, I think 250 is, if you're a 250 marathoner, you shouldn't be up in the start, up in the front there. As you have a look at Gold Coast was 245 and then the rest. 250 is, I think that's a bit, I think that's a bit lenient. I think those sorts of runners need to be back with the pack, or with the best of the rest, because from experience there are runners who start behind the barriers who will go flying past those runners who can get themselves into that area. So I think they sort of need to have a bit of a split. Now, I think 245, if they had a look at something like Gold Coast, they set that as a priority start area. Now, obviously, the Melbourne Marathon is their own event and they can do their own thing, but I think they need to split that front area into two parts, and really that's for the protection of the athletes who should be up the front. I think you need to have clear definition of who needs to be right at the pointy end of the field in the first 3, 4, 5 rows, and then put the priority start people who are going to be the next, say, 8 to 10 rows, and then have the rest of the field. Maybe 230 might be their number, 230 and 245. The lead, but going back to my point before, I think as long as you capture about the top 50 men and top 10 women based on their qualifying time or whatever they've entered, I think that should be right. Now they can obviously work their times around that and keep it consistent for every year. There aren't too many changes as far as those sorts of finishing times across the board every year. So they could set a standard. So that's just what I think with part one. I'll move on to part two. Okay, so moving on to part two, I want to focus on just what I've seen from my own observations and just my own thoughts, my opinions on what certain runners decide to do in the allocated or non-allocated start groups. Now, I'll start with a couple of clips and we'll go right into it from there.
I'm a dick. I'm a dick.
Okay, so we had the two clips there. The first one was yelling out, "I'm a dick," and the second one was flipping the bird, giving everyone the finger. I'll refer to those as I go on in this. Now, I'll start with what I call the best of the rest, everyone who's outside of the seated priority start area, so from the 3-hour barrier to the back of the field. Unfortunately, it's kind of expected that runners will try and do a bit more of a dodgy in that part of the field. Now, it's not everyone, so the 99.99% of people are realistic about where they need to be. They position themselves where they need to be, and they're good about it. They show courtesy to their fellow runners, they're respectful, and they're switched on. And that's really good, top points to those runners. There are some runners who might be, say, a 5-hour runner who puts themselves up with the 3.5-hour runners, or they might be a 6-hour runner that put themselves with the 4-hour runners. That's a bit unfortunate that they decide to do that. they're not doing themselves any favours. They're not doing any of the runners around them any favours. And to me, they're flipping the bird to all the runners around them, the ones who have to basically run over the top of them when they start running 3, 4, 5 minutes a kilometre slower straight off the bat. Now, that happens in 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons, City to Surf. It happens in all those events. So, it's just, you can't police it all. And you have real twits who decide to do those sorts of things, who don't think about anyone but themselves and think, oh, look at me. None of their friends or family point out the fact that they probably shouldn't be where they are, but, I can't go into that too much. It's sort of expected and it's a bit unfortunate. One example I have from that is from one of the Melbourne Marathons I ran, where I ran sub 3 hours. I was about 3 or 4 rows back from the barriers. There was a bloke next to me wearing black. I won't highlight what his name was or what his number was. And you could just tell by the look of him, he was punching well above his weight. He just slotted in and, he obviously the brain wasn't on. The brain was left home that day. He got a massive head on himself to do what he did. Anyway, so he took off at the start. We got about 20 metres in front of where I was. And very quickly, he was having to be run over the top of by not only myself, I just about tripped over him. And so did about, could have been 10, 20 others, because this guy was going backwards very quickly, going up Batman Avenue. And he ended up doing just over 6 hours. He was up with people who were going to run 4:13, 4:14 through to say 4:20, 4:25 pace. And he ended up doing over 8 minutes, 8.5 minutes a kilometre. You could just about walk that pace. So ideally they should have put themselves further back. The guy is a genuine flog, and I haven't got time for runners like that. And I think they should be penalised for doing things like that. From the pointy end of the field, I will give you an example from Melbourne. Unfortunately, I don't have any examples from the Gold Coast, but as I say, they have their start areas at the front of the field pretty well set and policed very well. Being the premier marathon, that's one thing that separates them from the rest of Australia as for marathons. I have seen some 2 hour 45 to 2 hour 50 runners. As we go back to what I said before, 99.99% of the athletes up in that part of the field, fantastic. They're elites, they're professional runners, they're intermediate runners who are experienced, are knowledgeable, courteous to others. They've travelled around the world. They do this all the time, and they show common courtesy to their fellow runners, and it's fantastic. Big points to them too. Fantastic people. Can learn a lot from them. Unfortunately, on this case, there was some 245, 250 runners who decided to put themselves up on the front row, or the second row of the Melbourne Marathon. Now, straight off the bat, this is where they need to yell out that they are a dick. Go back to that video before where yell out they're a dick. That's exactly what those runners, we're only talking about 1, 2 or 3 runners that are genuine dicks for doing that. You are obviously don't care about any of the runners around you. I'll put it this way. No runner who has any respect for any other runners in the field does what they did. No one who has their brain switched on does what they did. No one who, has time for other runners does what they did. No one with a conscience does what they do. Now, some of these runners may be highly intelligent people outside of running. But when you see them do this sort of shit, this stupid, idiotic shit, in major marathons where you've got people around you who are going for big prize money, who are going for qualifiers, they're going for $10,000, $20,000 paychecks. They're going for Olympic qualifiers, World Championship qualifiers, Commonwealth Games qualifiers. They could be qualifying for events overseas. These flogs of humans who should be at the back of the priority start area decide to do stupid things like that. They don't have the brain switched on. They don't have a conscience. They have no common courtesy for any other runners around them. And to me, they are dead set flogs. They're twits. They're wankers. They're dickheads. You name it. I could go on for hours. I think it's completely stupid what they do. And I think they should be penalised for it. Now, this isn't someone, it can happen in any run where you position yourself where you should be and you hit the wall and you start going backwards. That's running. That happens. These are people who have made I can't call it a conscious decision because the tumbleweed's going through the head. Look at me, I'll put myself up on the front. I can get photos, I'll be in the promo stuff. Look at me, I'm the biggest wanker in the world. I'm gonna do this because I can. There's no valid reason why they do it. There is no valid reason. Now, if there is, please tell me. Put in the comments below, or approach me in person and tell me exactly why people do that. A logical reason why they do that. Now, it's not get a clean start. Because I can. They're not valid reasons. That's not logic. I'll give you an example. When I start, I'm about 20 or 25 rows back from the start. It takes me 7 seconds, either on the Gold Coast or on Melbourne. It's taken me about 7 or 8 seconds to cross the start line. So don't get a clean start. That doesn't cut it. The gun time, chip time, you're not fighting over a few seconds, in a marathon. 7 seconds, who cares? And because you can, well, that's just, you don't even go down that path. I think, honestly, it needs to be policed a bit better. If it was me, I would, and I was, part of the organising thing, I think they need to do a split like what happens on the Gold Coast, so they stop that stupidity, or at least limit it in some capacity. If it was me, I would tell those runners to piss off to the back of the field, piss off with the 7-hour runners. Who cares if you can run 2:45 or 2:50? Piss off back with the 7-hour people and, fight your way through. Show that you, deserve the right to be up in the pointy end of the field. Now, obviously, that would never happen. A realistic approach would be, if you caught once, you get told don't do it again, and you go to back through the priority start field where you probably should be. Second attempt is you don't get forward to that 3-hour barrier ever again, or you get banned from the event or something. Now, that might be harsh, but I think that's fair. So that's just what I think. Let me know what you think about that. Any feedback, arguments, whatever. Happy to take it all on board. Or approach me in person. No better way of doing it. If you think otherwise, or whatever, let's have a discussion about it. Quite happy to. So that's my sort of rant of part 2. It's gone a little bit longer than I expected, but so that's the end of my overall video. Hope you liked it. Like, favorite, share, subscribe if you want to see more, and let me know if you'd like to see any specific topics that I bring up, and we'll see you in the next video.